if the Sabbath on the biblical calendar does not fall on Saturday, why does the Seventh-day Adventist Church still teach that Saturday is the Sabbath? Why has the leadership not informed the church members? How long has the leadership known that Saturday is not the true Bible Sabbath? This is a simple math equation with which most SDAs are well acquainted. 2,300 minus 457, you have to minus because it is BC, plus 1 because there was no 0 year, reaches to 1844. This pinpoints AD 31 as the year of the crucifixion. But how did the Millerites arrive at a precise ending date for the prophecy? The Millerites understood that the sanctuary was cleansed each year on the Day of Atonement. Leviticus 23 gives the date for the Day of Atonement as the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Gregorian calendar, though, the 10th day of the 7th month is in the middle of summer, not the fall, as concluded by the Millerites. The Millerites knew that in order to find the Day of Atonement and the precise ending date for the 2,300-year prophecy, they needed to use the biblical calendar, which is based exclusively upon the motions of the heavenly bodies. Heaven used this mighty prophetic movement to begin restoring a knowledge of the original calendar to the world. In 1938, General Conference President J.L. McCallany appointed a research committee to study the issue. The committee included Dr. Leroy Frum, Chairman, Dr. Lynn Harper Wood, Secretary, Dr. M.L. Andreasen, and Elder F.C. Gilbert, among other well-known leaders in the SDA Church. Their careful study of the Millerite methods and biblical calendar led them to an entirely unexpected and unwelcome discovery. When the Sabbath is calculated by the biblical calendar, it does not fall on Saturday. Carefully reviewing the prophetic lines of the 2,300-day prophecy, they came across another shocking revelation. Although Scripture makes clear that Yahushua was crucified on Passover, the 6th day of the week, the Passover did not fall on Friday in AD 31. The ramifications of this are vast and far-reaching. However, when the biblical calendar is applied to the lunar movements in AD 31, it's discovered that the crucifixion could not have taken place on a Friday. Furthermore, the weekly cycle of the biblical calendar does not correspond to the weekly cycle of the modern calendar, because there is no way possible for Yahushua to have been crucified on a Friday in AD 31, even though he was crucified on the 6th day of the biblical week. The research committee was at a loss to know what to do. They studied the ramifications of presenting the biblical calendar to the church. M.L. Andreasen wrote numerous letters advising against the church adopting the biblical calendar with its weekly cycle and its Sabbaths regulated by the new moon. Most of these letters are not available to the average Adventist. However, the thrust of Andreasen's arguments are well summed up in an undated letter he sent to fellow committee member Grace AMADON. Quote, "It would not be easy to explain to the people that the God who advocated and instituted such an arrangement would be very concerned about the exact 7th day. Quote, If an explanation were possible, and the people were at last adjusted to the shift in the feast day and the stability of the seventh day, it might be supposed that in time they would get used to the arrangement. But they would no sooner have become accustomed to this, till another shift is made, and another shift comes, and another, and another. There is no uniformity, and just as the people get used to a certain arrangement, the day is changed again. Such is more than the common people can understand, and if we go to the people now with such a proposition, we must expect that confusion will result. Quote, "If the new calendar scheme we are considering adopting, it should be admitted that local communities have the right of making their own observations of the moon. It would yet remain a question if the proper men competent for such observation would be available. Quote, if the people observing the Sabbath also advocate the new scheme of calendation, the resulting confusion will not be of any help to us." The endorsing, unreservedly, of the plan now before us seems to me, in its implications so loaded with dynamite, with TNT, that we might well beware. I would most earnestly warn the committee in this matter. I am afraid of the repercussions. M.L. Andreasen, Grace AMADON Collection, Andrews University, Box 2, Folder 4. If you're interested, a link to the true copy of Andreasen's letter and a retyped version is posted in the description box below. But what about the Jews, you ask? Surely they would never miss track of the seventh-day Sabbath. It is true that the Jews today worship on Saturday. It is also true that they have not lost the concept of a seventh-day Sabbath. However, by their own admission, they deliberately set aside the biblical calendar, which was calculated by the phases of the moon. Quote, declaring the new month by observation of the new moon, and the new year by the arrival of spring, can only be done by the Sanhedrin. In the time of Hillel II, 4th century A.D., the Romans prohibited this practice. Hillel II was therefore forced to institute his fixed calendar. End of quote. Citation, The Jewish Calendar Changing the Calendar, www.torah.org. Quote, Rabbi Louis Finkelstein, a well-known scholar from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, emphatically stated, the present Jewish calendar was fixed in the 4th century. End of quote. Citation taken from www.exposingtheenemy.com. What we believe, does God have a calendar? Jewish confessions prove lunar Sabbaths. Quote, the new moon is still, and the Sabbath originally was, dependent upon the lunar cycle. End of quote. Holidays, Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, page 410. Quote, the months of the year were lunar, and began with the new moon. End of quote. The Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, calendar, page 631. Therefore, the claim that one keeps Sabbath on Saturday because the Jews keep it on Saturday does not prove anything, since they themselves admit that the true calendar was set aside and replaced with the modern Jewish calendar.
Well, what we have to remember is, first of all, what Jesus said. He said, don't forget that man was not made for the Sabbath was made for man. And the Lord himself, we're told, was the Lord of the Sabbath, so he had the authority in areas as far as how we would observe that commandment. What your brother-in-law may not understand is that the Catholic Church did not change that commandment. The Catholic Church observes the commandment to keep holy the Sabbath, but it does so on the Lord's Day. And the earliest Christians transferred their observance of that commandment from Saturday to Sunday, first of all because there was a distinct break between the Old Testament requirements, the rituals and Mosaic covenant demands dealing with the Sabbath worship and animal sacrifices and that sort of thing. And they wanted to show that Christianity was distinct from Judaism. It came from Judaism, but it was distinct from it. Celebrating the Lord's coming, celebrating the Lord's resurrection and death on the day that he rose from the dead seemed to be the most appropriate. The other thing that we should remember, too, is that our calendar that we follow, including Seventh-day Adventists, is not only a calendar that was devised by the Catholic Church, but also it is a calendar that's based upon the solar year, not the lunar year. And the Jewish calendar that was observed in the time of Christ it follows a lunar calendar, which is several days short of the solar calendar. So the great irony is that even the Seventh-day Adventists themselves are not worshiping on exactly the same Sabbath day as the Jews at the time of Christ, because it's several days off now, having switched to following the lunar calendar. So the great irony is that even the Seventh-day Adventists themselves are not worshiping on exactly the same Sabbath day as the Jews at the time of Christ, because it's several days off now, having switched to following the lunar calendar.
I knew that our Bible, this one, was written on the lunar calendar. Our calendar, the Western civilization calendar, is the Gregorian calendar from Pope Gregory of Rome. That means it's pagan in origin. It's not God's calendar. Our calendar and the calendar of this book do not match. Sun God is for Sunday. Moon God is for Monday. That's a sermon for another time. Believe me, much of what Christianity salutes is pagan to its roots.
But then indeed, when you did not know God, you served those which by nature are not gods. But now, after you have known God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you turn again to the weak and beggarly elements, to which you desire again to be in bondage? You observe days and months and seasons and years. I am afraid for you, lest I have labored for you in vain. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one slaves whom you obey, whether of sin leading to death, or of obedience leading to righteousness? While they promise them liberty, they themselves are slaves of corruption. For by whom a person is overcome, by him also he is brought into bondage.
My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil.